And at that moment, in March 2015, on the back end of an argument between my wife and I, one where I was drinking a lot, right? So we get in this clash and this argument, and I remember like Cleo's crying, and I storm off, and I'm pissed off, and I go upstairs, and I just sit in the closet of all places just to kind of like blow off some steam, and then there I am with my own 45 in my mouth, truly believing that this is for the better.
What happens when everything you've built your identity around, your mission, your duty, and your purpose, suddenly disappear? For years, my guest had one unshakable belief: the mission comes first, no matter the cost. But when the deployments ended, the real struggle began in his own mind. In March of 2015, alone in a closet, 45 in his mouth, convinced that this was his only way out. In this episode of Click Heal Connect, you're going to find an unfiltered, raw, and deeply personal conversation about guilt, the weight of sacrifice, and the long road towards healing. If you've ever struggled with identity, purpose, or the darkness that follows you home, this is a conversation you're going to want to listen to. Everyone's got a story, but this one's Willy's. So if you think about 2007, 2015, you hit 2015. What changed in 2015 that's not part of that chapter?
Well, in March of 2015, I hit my lowest low. And I think that's the demarcation of that. It's not the move necessarily. It was March of 2015. So, is my lowest low. It's when literally it's not typically hard for me to talk about this, but I guess I want to approach this with respect, because it's such a huge turning point in my heart. Especially in retrospect, when I think of it. It was the day that I had my own 45 in my mouth. I was on some context. The year, a couple years prior, 2012, I think I hit the peak of our trade. Awesome deployment. And really, I just had a badass team. I had an awesome team, and we just did a lot of great work. From all angles. And I don't need to dissect it here, but it was, dude, that was a magical deployment when it comes to like operational effectiveness and impact on the battlefield. And even learning. We did all types of cool stuff. We lost a few guys during that deployment. And then after the deployment, I lost my little brother. So my little brother, I have two half brothers and a stepbrother and a stepsister.
Okay.
One of my half brothers, they're twins. His name's Matthew. He OD'd that summer. When I got back, man, that hit me hard.
Of course.
For a lot of reasons, that hit me hard. And then that just put me in a position where I started questioning myself as a brother. And I had a hard time dealing with it. I have a lot of baggage with my mom. So then I was facing and dealing with that again. It kind of reared its head during that time. So I'm like, you know what? I need to deploy again. So I found a deployment And that was the Philippines deployment. I'm like, and gave everyone every reason to send me and no reason not to send me on that deployment. I'm like, I just need to leave.
You feel like that was just a good separator?
I thought so. I'm like, yeah, I need this. I need to leave for a bit. So I went through a mini workup and deployed like about a year after I got back from my 2012 deployment, pushed out again. And that one, dude, that one put me in a bad place because I had the whole do whatever it takes thing towards the mission. So I made a lot of moral compromises in the way I approached that job just to get the mission done. One of the primary missions was to hunt down this terrorist from like one of the primary terrorist actors in the southern Mindanao area, because he was responsible for the death of a couple Army soft guys a few years prior. So I made a lot of compromises to ensure that I got all the data, did all the collection, did all the targeting, did all the patterning of this guy and his broader network, that I could, in and outside of our own rules and in and outside of like moral rules.
Whatever it took.
Right, whatever it took. And I did a lot of drinking during that time. I did a lot because there just wasn't a lot of oversight on the things we did during that deployment.
Fast and loose.
Dude, I was smashed every day.
Yeah.
Smashed every day. And I get back home. So after all these things are starting to stack on each other, I get back home, 2014, and I have a year and I got selected for Mass Sergeant then. So all this talk about who's going to go to Headquarters Marine Corps and be a monitor started coming into play. So then it was just like, oh my gosh, like I'm going to be kicked out of this unit. Even though I'm not getting kicked out,
right.
You're being put into a position that's kind of honorable and respected. Right. But I received it differently.
No doubt.
I received it as I'm getting kicked out because there's these other Mass Sergeants that are going to stay here. To a job that I don't want to do, that I'm probably not going to be good at. And then it just started to spiral. Because I'm like, I'm a SOX F. That's what we call ourselves at the time, a SOX F. So Special Operations Capability Specialist. F is the designator for SIG and EW. I'm like, I'm a SOX F. And I'm going to be pushed to this.
I'm too valuable.
Yeah, I'm too valuable. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I just did this X, Y, and Z over the past 9 years, and you're going to send me to this. And then it made me think, well, shoot, if they're going to send me to this, who am I? Like, there must be something wrong with what I'm doing.
You're not seeing it.
And I'm like, and I'm wondering, I'm questioning, like, did I do good enough? Like, did we not target enough dudes? Or maybe we got the wrong dudes. Maybe we didn't protect enough of our brothers and sisters. Like, what if I didn't do my job well enough? Right? Maybe I neglected force protection and indications and warning. Maybe I missed that. And then I'm like, well, shoot, if I'm going to be leaving, now I have to face these other big roles
that you know nothing really about yet.
And to be honest, I thought I knew what it meant to be a husband, and I thought I knew what it meant to be a father. And I'll give myself credit. We have great memories and moments from that time period. Awesome memories and moments from that time period. I think I did some great things, as I think I was okay. But man, I sucked.
Yeah.
And at that moment, in March 2015, on the back end of an argument between my wife and I, one where I was drinking a lot, right? And so we get in this clash and this argument, and I remember like Cleo's crying, and I storm off, and I'm pissed off, and I go upstairs, and I just sit in the closet of all places just to kind of like blow off some steam, and then there I am with my own 45 in my mouth, truly believing that this is for the better, right? And I'll say I knew, okay, that I'm like, that's very selfish, right? That is so selfish. In retrospect,
yeah,
I'm like, that is so selfish. That is so weak, I'm like, yes, that's selfish and that was weak, but I legitimately thought, I'm like, man, I'm gonna do some people a favor. I don't even know who I am, right? Because apparently I'm not good at anything. So it kind of spiraled on that. I'm not good at anything. I'm like, and I was ready.
Yeah.
I keep I keep a round in the chamber of all my weapons in my house. I've always have, because that's why you have them. So I have my 45 and my finger on the trigger, dude, and I could taste the CLP and the gunpowder on it. And I remember there was an inner battle. There was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this right now. Like, but no. And then there's the part of me is like, someone needs to talk me out of it right now. Someone needs to talk me out of it. And then I got like a convenient distraction, right? And I don't even know if convenient distraction, I got a distraction. And there was a book in the corner of the closet between where I held my gun and the wall. It was a leather book. And I pulled this thing out and like, I had never seen this. I haven't seen this in a long time. Not since my first deployment in 2004. And it was my Bible. It is my New King James Version Holy Bible. And I bought it before I deployed the first time, and had it. And I thought, okay, maybe I should bring this with me. And I had that. But after that deployment, I kind of just forgot about that I even had it. And I had this dusty book, kind of like dusted it off. I'm like, okay, cool. And I put it down, and just shook it off and never thought about that Bible again. And then just moved forward with life. Right. We ended up PCSing. And then that's kind of like the next chapter where I'm like, okay, I need to get my stuff together. And that started like a whole other chapter of self-help books.
Right. Right. First of all, I don't know how easy or hard that is for you to just talk about that memory and reliving that and then having that resurface. But thank you for sharing that story with me.
Yeah.
Because there's a few things that stuck out to me. A few is probably underselling it. There's more than a few. But you were talking about the moment. And later on, you talked about, hey, that was selfish, right? When when you look at it, but you felt like it was the right thing to do within that frame of time. When you're sitting in the closet and you got the gun in your mouth. What's crazy to me is that I've had other conversations with people throughout my life, right? Not necessarily within the last month or the last year or so, that have had that exact different frame, different context, but moment where they truly believe this is a selfless act because, my spouse or my parents or my kids or whoever, my friends, are better off without me in this world. The connection, this is a crazy part for me, the connection of why a lot of people join the service or stay in the service is very selfless, right? You're doing all these other things for other people. You're serving these other people. And I get it. There's personal notoriety and personal things and achievements that come out of that. But to put on a uniform and fight for other people that you don't know their faces, you don't know what their beliefs are, is a truly selfless act. So you got this frame of who you may be internally in your DNA, a selfless individual, and then you get in that moment and you believe, that whatever you're about to do is beneficial.
Dude, and there's something to be said about honor cultures, right? Especially honor cultures that put the works of the individual humans at the highest value, right? And that's a way of saying like the mission, right? Because that's something that we create in our own, that we can accomplish at your highest, that's what you want to get to. So there's an honor there's an honor culture to the Marine Corps that puts at the highest value what you do, what you can do for Marines, what you can do for your nation. And that's cool. And I don't completely disagree with how respectable that is.
Sure.
But for those of us who, where that hierarchy ends, where the works and means of us as human beings that's your limit of understanding and really at the limit of your worship, then there's a shame component to it that you just can't escape, because we're obviously flawed. Oh, we make mistakes. We're not perfect beings. So when those fissures start entering into however you've identified who you are, you're going to end up in a bad place.
No doubt.
Because that's bound to break, right? Because there's nothing eternal about something that we can create on our own. There isn't, right? We're just a mist that doesn't even shape the room. It just exists and then goes away.
Or,
at least in an earthly, fleshy sense.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, it's amazing that, okay, within the structure of like that we created ourselves within the Marine Corps, where it's selfless.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's selfless, but you're still worshiping your own abilities to do things.
Yeah. Oh. I agree with that. So I'm not looking at that from that lens
right?
specifically, but how you're explaining it. Yes, absolutely.
So that went to shit.
Yes.
And I just didn't have the foundation and the soil and the roots planted deep enough to shake from it. Other than that split second that just distracted me and then pushed me in another direction. And that was enough. That was enough, dude. It could have been like another glass of whiskey or something. Could have like put me down the opposite end. Who knows, right? And it's one of those like by God's grace alone did I move forward. And there's shame and guilt that goes with that too, right? Because a lot of our dudes don't make it for whatever reason.
They choose different path. Yeah. For everybody out there, if we can just kind of start from the beginning. Where were you born? Where'd you grow up?
Oh, start from the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was born on Fort Lewis, Washington.
Okay.
My dad was in the Army at the time. He was at he's at 1st Special Forces Group on his way to becoming like, a big badass. I came along and my mom at the time convinced him like, hey, like you're going to start a family. So he ended up leaving the Army at the time and moved to California. So I was actually raised in San Jose, California for as long as I can remember. I don't even remember Washington. I haven't been back since. And most people know San Jose, California for the Silicon Valley. So that's where I was from, kind of in on the east side of San Ho.
Okay.
In kind of a suburban, maybe lower middle class type of area. Yeah.
Okay. So you already got into it a little bit, about your childhood, from the moving from Washington to east side of San Ho, as you said.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about your childhood. Describe it for me a little bit.
Describe it. Dude, that's a great question. So forgive me, I'm going to think out loud here. I think I would describe it with, I think autonomy is a word I would use.
Okay.
Because I think like most dudes from our generation who were born in the 80s or late 70s and grew up into the 90s, we were just kind of feral kids. I remember as an 8-year-old knowing the public transportation system because I would take buses on my own all over town. It's the typical I walked this many miles to school and this many miles.
You got it so easy these days.
But it's true.
Yeah.
And I was like a latchkey kid. Like by definition, I had, a key to my house, not my house, my grandmother's house around my neck. And that's how I got in and out of home, for a long bit. And that's how I grew up. So I think that's how I would characterize it.
Right.
There's a lot in there. There's a lot packed in there.
Yeah, of course.
Because I didn't have a steady, my dad was such a godsend, because when my parents broke up, so I come from like a broken household.
Sure.
My grandmother, my Lola, who originated my version of this recipe through my mom and then to me, and my memories are nested in my Lola. She had a huge part on picking up some slack.
Whatever, there was a gap or something along those lines.
Absolute gap.
Yeah.
And more and more, I spent more time with my dad. He got his stuff together, and then I ended up like living with my dad eventually. But
wow,
my grandmother was such a big part of it.
Wow. So how old were you when your parents split? Do you remember?
Yeah, I think 4 or 5 years old. About 4 or 5 years old.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, not to throw anyone's age out there, but let's just say that was 30 plus years ago. So
it was 30 plus years ago.
Yeah. So we don't have to do the exact math, but you've had a lot of time to reflect on things that have went on, as you were a child or growing up, and maybe through your teen years. Thinking back and on those times, if you could, is there anything that stood out to you that you believe helped shape who you are today from when you were a kid?
Yeah. I don't know if it's one thing.
Okay.
I'll say the autonomy thing was huge. The self-reliance, self-reliance is a product of that, I think. But if I were to boil it down to a picture, right? And this is me just creating the picture in my mind. Yeah. And when I go back to a moment that had such a huge impact of me, I see this picture. It's me sitting at my Lola's house, right? And this after school, I let myself in. I gather some food and I'm sitting in front of the TV. It's me sitting there, and it was one of those TVs where it's like a piece of furniture, right? So this is the 80s. So it's a piece of furniture. It's made out of wood. It's made out of wood. It's built in. And in front of that TV, waiting for my mom to pick me up. Because every now and then my mom would pop in and out of my life. And I would be just waiting there for her. And in that picture, she doesn't show up. And that comes with the emotions, right?
Of course.
And there's consequences to that. But then sometimes she would show up. And she would come with a gift. And then I would have a story. Mm-hmm. But that story didn't have value unless it was one of achievement that caught attention.
Her attention.
Okay. And then another line to that picture is, then my dad would pick me up, and then we'd go off, and he's my stable rock.
Right.
So I think that's the picture that I anchor to whenever I think about my childhood.
Yeah.
Because so much is baked into that.
Of course. I mean,
yeah, man.
There's a lot of different angles of different elements from your dad, your mom, the memory of being at Lola's house. And so from all of that, I say all of that because there is a lot that's packed in there. But from that vision or anything from your adolescence was, you talked about autonomy. Were some of those things potentially driving factors in you looking when you joined the Marine Corps? Or did you look at another service, or, did any of that drive that decision for you?
Dude, so let's see. Last I remember hanging out at my grandmother's house, at my Lola's home, I was maybe somewhere between 10 and 12 years old.
Okay.
About 12 years old. Because that's when, Like I completely moved in with my dad.
Yeah.
We ended up moving to a nicer side of town. But that's after like a foundational part of me was already raised in very like feral like environment, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of that had an impact on how like I was a teen.
Hmm.
Meaning I knew how to operate within the seams. So whatever structure was put on me, man, I knew how to operate in the seams and do whatever I wanted to do.
Right.
And how that impacted how I joined the Marine Corps, dude. One, I turned into like a complete pothead.
Hmm.
I was like a legit like pothead.
What'd you tell your recruiter?
I told my recruiter that I've never smoked weed ever. Yeah.
Well,
And then later on, and we'll talk about this, like
Yeah.
my MOS, there was a point where I felt super guilty and had to tell my investigator, I'm like, hey, check this out. My
By the
recruiter
way-
told me something.
Yeah.
But I smoked a lot of weed in high school.
Okay.
But regardless, I mentioned that because when we were given the option to take the ASVAB in high school, they said you would miss all the morning classes.
Hmm.
So I'm like, awesome, perfect
That's
time.
Yeah. It's appealing.
Yeah, perfect time to miss class, to smoke out,
Mhm.
and all I got to do is take a test.
Right. Who cares if I pass or fail?
Exactly. So I passed. I did really well, and obviously, you know how it is. Like recruiters just kind of come on you at
Right.
that point.
Right.
And I kind of took it for what it was. Summer came, and I was so not only was I a pothead,
Mhm.
but I was a graffiti writer, like a graffiti artist,
Okay.
right?
That's
So
talent. There's talent that's in there.
dude, there's talent, and there's also like there's talent in not getting caught, right? So I gained, dude, in real talk, I gained during that time. I gained some serious like skills when it came to the type of work we do.
Yeah.
So anyways, so I thought, like, I was convinced I'm going to go to college for art.
Mm.
So the Academy of Art San Francisco, that's where I wanted to go. And the summer before my senior year, I was putting this portfolio together, and I still have remnants of it. But I was putting this portfolio together. I wanted to attend this summer school that made it kind of a shoe-in that you would make it when you applied for college.
Mhm.
Needless to say, like, I got in trouble that summer because I hotboxed my room and I got caught. And I was told, you're not going to do any of that. You're in trouble. There's consequence to that. And we're not going to fund, like my parents were like, you're not going to fund any, we're not going to fund any of that. It's not happening.
Yeah.
So of course, coming from like a foundation of autonomy, I'm like,
I'll figure this out. I'll make a way.
you're not going to tell me what to do.
Yeah.
Fuel.
That's fuel at that point.
I'm joining the Marine Corps. I'm out of here. Right? Remember the little cards? They still have them today. The cards that they put in front of you for, so why do you want to join the Marine Corps?
To get you to yes.
Yeah, the recruiters.
Yeah.
Like I picked all the self ones, self-reliance, self-confidence, stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, that's what I want. And it was very much, I'll show you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'll show you.
That's powerful motivation, though.
It is.
It is powerful motivation,
right? And it was not just an I show you, but it was very much, I will make it and not have to owe you anything. Right? So it was so selfish.
Yeah.
Because there was nothing in me that understood and respected the context that they were coming from. Right? So I'm like, no, I'm going to show you. And I'm going to do it all without you. I'm going to go to school. I'm going to do whatever I need to do without you. And that's what got me the Marine Corps. Absolutely. And dude, I'll add this layer to it. The Navy was on me at first. And it felt natural because I'm Filipino, and Filipinos join the Navy, right? Filipinos join the Navy.
I don't know if that's written in black and white, but
it's not written, but that's the expectation. I'm like, okay, cool. You know, of course the Navy's talking to me.
Right.
And I'm like, I was down. And the first appointment I was supposed to have with that recruiter, he didn't show up. And to give you another psych profile where I'm coming from is in the other office next door, I saw a bunch of fit dudes throwing a football around in the office, not caring that I was standing there.
Right.
I'm like, what? Like, these guys don't see me just standing around. I walk in, I'm like, hey, what's up, guys? And they didn't come at me, right? They just said, what's up?
Just another conversation.
They just said, it's another conversation.
Yeah.
So what's on your mind? And they probably knew.
Oh, of course.
They probably saw it written all over my face.
Of course.
But they probably knew. And I'm like, well, so what's this place? And it didn't take a lot of selling. Like, I want that.
Yeah.
Like, I want that.
Yeah.
So I joined the Marine Corps.
Wow. So one of the things you mentioned in there was this portfolio of work. And, I'm assuming it was your graffiti work. What was like? I'm picturing like you going around town and taking pictures of your art and then putting it on in a picture book.
There's a couple pictures, and a lot of it's just in a book. A lot of like artwork.
Okay, just like going with whatever's in your hand, not pictures of your work somewhere else.
Both.
Okay.
Both. Okay. Yeah.
So
I'll dig it up sometime.
Yeah. I get that obviously you spent, a lifetime in the Marine Corps, but thinking back on that time from, hey, that could have been a path of this, artistic adventure, right? You tap into that? Like, is that something you just don't do?
I don't know, not directly.
Okay.
No.
Okay. So there's no extra cans of spray paint in the garage. Could have been like a tag on the wall or nothing like that.
No.
Okay.
No, I think a lot of that energy has kind of transferred to writing.
Yeah.
And I think I put words together in a very similar way that I used to approach like visual art.
Gotcha. Okay. So you joined the Marine Corps.
Yep.
What year was that?
2000. Well, I was in the delayed entry program for about a year.
Okay.
And that was summer of, when was it? Summer of 99. And then I joined the Marine Corps June 12th of 2000.
And then was that right after you graduated high school, or did you do something else?
Just right after.
Okay. So you said June 12th. So that was like literally not, it was a couple of days after graduation.
Yeah, it was right after. Yeah. And I was 17. I turned 18 in September of that same year. So I graduated boot camp, and then I turned 18. That's crazy. Trying to think back to that time. Super naive, very selfish.
Oh. I mean, you're a teenager. I mean, sure, you're late teens.
Yeah.
But you're still a teenager.
No, I give myself that
your
grace.
vision of the world is totally different.
Well, it is, but here's the deal. When I know it's kind of a fast forward, but I have to compare it. I had the absolute honor and blessing to serve as a senior enlisted at the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, which is a school I started off in. And every time a Marine would show up, we had a group of Marines, I would have my opportunity to get to know them. And dude, there were so many of them who joined for like honorable reasons. Like they want to serve, right? They want to serve. They want to be part of the fight. They saw what you were doing and what I was, or heard what you were doing and what I was doing during OIF and OEF, and just heard of those adventures and those stories and wanted to be part of it. Dude, when I joined, we didn't have any conflict.
That's right.
At least not as overt as post 9/11.
Right. Well, it wasn't on the news.
It wasn't on the news, or maybe we just weren't paying attention.
Right.
And I would lie to say I joined to serve. Like I joined a service, and I eventually learned how to serve and what that meant. Right.
So speaking of feeling, I could feel that, right? Because same thing, right? So I joined in 98. There was nothing going on. Unless you were going on a MEU or something that was really dark, you were not doing anything. The only thing I did was go to 29 Palms and do CAX, Combined Art Exercise.
That's what I hear.
And I thought 29 Palms meant you were going to the desert. And sure, you were going to the desert to 29 Palms, right? Drive past Joshua Tree, go hang out at 29 Palms for a couple of weeks. But obviously we learned much later on in life that that's not the desert, right? Talk about the desert, talk about a lot of other things. So you did fast forward, but I want to go back. So you joined the Marine Corps. You know, what was your job in the Marine Corps? If you could tell us about that and kind of describe it a little bit.
Yeah, the MOS was 2671.
Okay.
2600 is SIG and EW, so Signals and Intelligence and Electronic Warfare, and 71 was the designator for cryptologic linguist.
Mm.
What that means is, I mean, you learn a language.
Right.
It's supposed to be the mainstay of your job.
Right.
Right. So 2671 was Arabic. So modern standard Arabic. Dude, when I got to DLI, being a dude from Cali, right? So DLI is in Monterey, California.
Right.
One, I didn't even pick that job, but the fact it was in Monterey, California, I said I want that.
Was enough.
It was enough because
Yep.
I also had a girlfriend who lived in Santa Cruz. Whole of this story.
Nothing.
So I'm like, yeah, I'll be there. And Santa Cruz is like an hour away from Monterey. But when I first got there, like from Asian descent or Pacific Islander descent, depending on who you talk to, I'm like, yeah, from Cali. Like, I'm going to get an Asian language. That just makes sense. Like, I'm either going to Japanese, Chinese, or Korean. That was what was on the menu at the time. I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm going to get. I got Arabic instead. Real talk, I didn't even know where Arabic was spoken.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's be real.
I believe you.
I didn't know where the Middle East was. Who knows where Iraq is, and even further east where Afghanistan is.
Yeah.
I was like, what's this? I'm gonna write from right to left and squiggly lines and dots. Like, this is what what I'm supposed to do. And I'm like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. And I didn't really get it until 9/11 happened.
Sure.
In the middle of my time in Monterey. So I'm at school, and I remember 9/11 happened. Like, I remember in the morning we're ironing our camis after starching it, after dipping it in buckets of starch.
You were a good Marine. I got it. Yeah.
I got you. So I'm ironing my camis in the morning, and we see on the news that, one of the Twin Towers was hit. We're like, oh my gosh. Okay, this must be a big deal. And then remember going into formation and us telling, hey, there's something going on. And a lot of us were talking about, like, man, like, wouldn't it be crazy if like a second one hit? Because that means it's legit. It's not an accident. And the second one hits, and we see it, right? The second one hits. And then more and more news comes out about what's going on, that, these are Islamic terrorists. And then instantly I'm like, that's why I'm learning Arabic.
Whole mind shift.
That, dude, complete mind shift, right? That's why I'm learning Arabic. And then the mission was like, okay, this is a real mission.
Right.
This is real.
This is going to lead into something bigger that I don't even know what it is.
Yeah, dude. And let's be real. Like, we have these stories, and it's not an understatement that it completely changed our lives, changed our perspectives, changed everything. Man, so that really formed me.
Yeah.
I know it formed us.
Oh, the generation.
But especially being in our job, because our job as cryptologic linguists, it's not just the language part. At the end of the, I know guys are going to argue this, that the language should be your primary job because that's what you're getting paid for, and that's the primary MOS. But one of the most valuable things about what we do is signals intelligence and electronic warfare. What that means is that it's our job to dissect communications for intelligence purposes, which means in order to protect forces, but also to take lives and hunt our enemy down. So doing it from an Arabic linguist perspective, it brings so much more intimacy to the job because there's never an off switch,
right?
Let alone being an intelligence professional. There's never an off switch because even when you're not deployed, you're mentally preparing and you're in the problem sets. So, man, talk about an experience that forms you. There's just so much to that.
So do you feel, so you first get 2671 and you realize this is Arabic, and obviously other than knowing how to spell it, which maybe you didn't even know how to do that at the time, you're like, I don't even know what this is. And you get this feeling of, was it a letdown, when you got the Arabic language because you didn't know anything about it or what it was? Did you feel let down? Did you feel misled? What was kind of what were you going through at that time?
No, so I'm the type that can easily put their blinders on.
Okay.
And if you give me a mission, like, I'm very adaptable.
I'm follow. Yeah.
Dude, I'm very shapeable
Mm-hmm.
and adaptable, where if you're saying this is your mission,
Yeah.
I'm going to go. Just tell me give me a fair expectation of what's going to happen, and I'll run into the wall.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I'll take it on and I'll wear that identity that you're giving me. Right? That's just the type of guy I think I am and I've been.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what
I think by now you figured it out. You figured out what type of guy you are, right? But whatever the issue is or whatever comes up, whatever the subject is, digest it.
Yeah, so I don't know if there's any trepidation in my heart at all. I just knew I had a mission. I'm like, dude, I want it. That's it.
Focus.
And remember that picture we were talking about?
Yeah.
That picture of, can you see me?
Mm-hmm.
That's a picture of, can you see me?
Mm.
Right? Waiting for someone to show up. Can you see me?
Right.
Right? And the Marine Corps is just really good at giving opportunities to achieve something. Right.
I tell a lot of people the same exact thing. The Marine Corps is not short on opportunities.
No.
It is just, it's actually abundant if you think about it. Forget the opportunity to go to a different unit, but the opportunities within the unit that you find yourself in. So I like how you frame that. I like, just taking the opportunity, and the Marine Corps did just that. So, okay.
Yeah.
PFC, were you a PFC at the time, or were you a private?
I was PFC.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, hey, PFC, here it is. Take it. Go do whatever you want with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you could take me back to, I got it, you were ironing your starch camis, which I love that, by the way. You put your camis on, you got the formation or whatever you're doing, and the second plane hits. What's the pulse? Like, what's the pulse of, the other students, during that time?
I think a lot of it for the Marine Corps detachment, we're good at pumping up the war effort. So we were just like, okay.
Getting hyped.
Yeah, getting hyped. This is what we're here for.
Yeah.
This is what we're here for.
Yeah.
Especially for the Arabic platoon.
Oh.
I don't know how it was for the other languages.
It's not Spain. Damn it.
Yeah, it's not Spain or Korea. Which is funny in itself, because we still deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan with all the other languages.
Of course.
Because at the end of the day, there were signals intelligence, electronic warfare, like operators who could do that job.
Right.
So, but yeah, I think that's how I would characterize that time.
I like the hype, right? Like you're saying, like, hey, that
hype.
Chest pumps out a little bit. You're like, let's go. Let's do it.
There was an extra layer of seriousness, like a deeper degree of purpose that got injected into our lives.
Yeah.
Man, it was pretty gnarly. It was interesting.
Yeah. So you're leaving DLI not long, or a little while after that. Where'd you go? What was your first duty station that you went to after that?
So it's worth saying that after DLI, we go to Goodfellow Air Force Base.
Thank you.
Right. So when we go to Goodfellow Air Force Base, and then that's where we learn some of like the nerdy SIGINT stuff. So we go there for a time, and then I ended up at Fort Gordon, Georgia.
Okay.
What's super interesting about Fort Gordon, Georgia is that it's not a Marine Corps base.
Yeah.
It's not one of our primary Fleet Marine Force units. It's a supporting establishment that does really cool national strategic type of support, indirect connection to whatever's going on out forward. And I mentioned that first because at the time, like when I was at DLI and Goodfellow, me and my homies, like my crew, we thought for sure we were going to go like radio reconnaissance. Right? Well, radio reconnaissance is our signals intelligence electronic warfare Marines who are also trained as reconnaissance men. Right? And that's like the Uber, like I want to get on the front. I want to be part of the war fight. That's the
easy button.
Yeah, that is like the way you want. That's the way to go.
Right.
So I'm like, that's where I'm going to go. And I get this other place, which is very far removed from the battle base.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Especially at that time.
Yeah.
So I show up at my first unit in 2000, 2002-ish, around 2002, 2003. And right away, as we start learning about the invasion in 2003, I'm literally petitioning to my commanding officer at the time, like, I'm ready to go. Send me. I'm ready to go. Send me. And I tried to, like, I had this mantra of, like, don't give anyone any excuse not to give you what you feel like you've deserved.
Right.
Right. I'm like, oh, I'm just
You've convinced yourself at this point.
I convinced myself I'm going to PT.
Right.
Like, I was doing ruck runs every day. I was swimming. I was like, I'll just show them from afar.
You're doing all this stuff already.
Yeah. Even though I'm not at a radio battalion, right?
Totally different state.
Yeah. Totally different state. Nowhere near any of these places. I'm the one you want to
This is the answer.
Yeah. And it didn't happen in the invasion.
Yeah.
But at the same time, those support units were being given very unique opportunities to actually deploy with the guys forward.
Okay.
So that's my first deployment was with 3rd Radio Battalion as an augmentee. So I augmented 3rd Radio Battalion in 2004, and spent most of 2004 on, like, in Fallujah, running a collection site as a team leader. So, yeah, it's just,
which was not Fort Gordon. But you kind of got your wish in a roundabout fashion, right?
Well, dude, and I think we'll talk about this, but in the grand scheme of things, working in a place that gave me national strategic type of perspective, knowing where the offices were and knowing where all these cool capabilities were, set us up. So that setback set me and guys like Q, Quentin Rendina, set us up for when we got to MARSOC, when MARSOC first stood up, not as an experiment, but as, like, a unit. It allowed us to innovate and bring, like, all these national strategic capabilities to bear onto the tactical operational problem.
You knew a whole other side that most folks had never witnessed, had never seen, different perspective.
We knew another side that wasn't rarely tapped into by the tactical forward user. And we just happened to be in the right place at the right time.
And then take advantage of it, though.
And
use that information.
Absolutely. So
to build something, create something.
That was fun.
So just like a book, right, that's got pages and chapters, and in those books, maybe some of those chapters shine brighter than others with good memories. Maybe it's meeting Carla, maybe it's joining the Marine Corps, birth of your daughter. The flip side of that is you probably have some chapters that are not so bright, right? Maybe a little bit darker.
And
there's probably some of those darker ones that stand out more than others because it was a significant event. It was a significant deployment. What's one that kind of rises to the surface for you? And you could tell me a little bit about that chapter.
No, that's good. So I'll say, I don't know if, there is an individual chapter, but I think there's some context here, bro. So, like I was saying, Rick, doing the job that we did, I don't think it's common for people to see and really get the opportunity to digest how the mindset and the intimacy of what we do affects us. So I say this from the perspective of when you're told your job is to know the enemy, to know the enemy so well that you can forecast and predict and give indications and warnings of what they're going to do in order to protect, like, your people. And then you're asked, okay, and I need you to know as much about them so you could hunt those people and like take them off of the battlefield. And then you're on this constant cycle of doing that.
Right.
Right. And coming from a person who takes things very personal, dude, that affects you just over and over and over again. And from a guy who joined the Marine Corps because really I was searching for an identity that I didn't have.
Yeah.
You start wearing that. The successes, the failures as well. So, man, when I think about that chapter in my life, so the deployment, so going to Iraq. In Iraq, I was really learning what force protection indications and warning were. That was mostly my job.
Okay.
Right. And then going into MARSOC, and doing that, but then adding some targeting to it, and then getting really good at hunting dudes. And then it's just racking and stacking dudes at a point. Right. So going to Afghanistan over and over and just getting really good at racking and stacking dudes. And then along the way, also failing. Like losing guys along the way.
Yeah.
And then eventually I ended up in the Philippines, which is weird. It's kind of like it's almost a sidetrack, but really like I went wherever there was a mosque. And Southern Philippines has a lot of like Islamic extremism in it.
Oh.
And then doing that type of job where there was a lot of autonomy and it was like you get the mission done at all costs type of stuff.
Yeah.
That affects people.
Right.
That affected me in so much of a way that I thought the mission was my highest value. My highest value. And when I say it's a dark chapter, because as cool as it sounds, like, oh, the mission's your highest value and you're hunting dudes and you're doing all this cool stuff. Because it's cool stuff, because you're working with agencies that you only see in movies and hear about. You're working, like being part of the special operations community. It sounds cool up front, and you get some autonomy, and you get all the resources you need in training and in equipment. It's awesome to be part of.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the ugly part is that I truly believed that the mission was at my highest value, where I overtly and repeatedly told my wife and daughter that they were second to the mission. And the worst part's not even telling them that. The worst part is actually believing that was the honorable thing. Right? That was the honorable thing for me to do and say and believe and act out, that the mission was at the highest value for me. And we have this saying, and, like when we talk about like dudes, it's like, oh yeah, like this dude, oh, she's a true believer. Oh, he's a true believer. Man, as a man of faith now, when I look back at what I thought was a true believer,
Totally different.
Dude, completely different.
Yeah.
Right? And I look back like, oh my gosh. Wow, by God's grace alone did I make it to where I am today.
Right.
So that was a super dark chapter.
So that sounds longer than a chapter. That sounds,
yeah, dude.
I don't know what the average length of a chapter is, but if I'm thinking, 30 pages, I feel like you're describing multiple deployments, multiple, come back and reset for a couple months, go back out. That was a continuous.
It was a continuous
thing for
thing.
you.
It was a continuous thing, right? I'll say the chapter was probably from 2000. We'll say 2007 to 2015. 2007 to 2015 is that chapter, because 2007 was when my daughter was born.
Okay.
So married with a daughter, born in 2007 to 2015. And 2015 was when I left MARSOC. Right. I got to that unit in 2006, and I was there for 9 years. Which was awesome. Super cool. Right. And this is before everyone started calling themselves Raiders.
Right.
Right. We just call ourselves MSOP, Marine Special Operations Battalion. We were just Marines. We were just dudes
Doing shit.
trying to be really good at our job.
Right.
Right. Trying to protect each other and trying to take as many lives as possible at the same time. Bad dudes, right? As far as who we knew bad dude were bad, right? So that was the lifestyle. Like, how can I do this better over and over? How can I do this better? How can I do this better? From 2006 to 2015 or 2007 to 2015. And that's who I thought I was. That was everything who I was.
Yeah.
And that is a chapter broken into different sections,
Sure.
but that is a
Sure.
chapter.
I understand. So when you're talking about, you were saying out loud, right, to your family, you're not first. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
And you believed it.
Yeah. I believed it.
Yeah. So not only obviously verbally you're communicating this, somehow obviously through your actions, because you're going to work or you're doing whatever, you're deploying, you're doing what you think is everything to you, or the number one. It's not say everything, but the number one. So that's a long time that you had spaced in there, right? 2007, 2015. When you think back on that time frame, and we'll just keep along the same theme. When you think back on that chapter, what do you remember most about that?
I remember each team, like that I had the honor to be part of. I remember the dudes, right? We still hang out with them. They're part of our close group that we see often and talk to often and get together with once a year. Those are fond memories. I think of all the cool things we got to do, all the achievements, like those stick out a lot.
They're real, they're tangible. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's like these deep valleys in there as well. And what sucks about the deep valleys is that those are the spaces in between deployments. Right? And I say those deep valleys because in retrospect, they're memorable to me because in the times that I should have been recalibrating and checking my azimuth on my heart towards the things that are closest to me.
Of course.
My mind and my heart was still on the mission. And I know that doesn't get at your answer or your question like very clearly, but those are the things I think of during that time.
They're your memories, right? I'm not here to tell you that those are right or wrong. It's just that's your heart, man, right? Those are the things you take away. Those are the things that stick out to you.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, there's just a lot to that's packed in there, bro.
Fine. I know you said you had some things that led you, you said 2007, 2015. And there were some other events that were packed in there. You talked about your brother, deployments, or being home and not doing what you were supposed to do. But there was obviously some buildup to March 2015. Didn't just appear out of the air. So other than maybe some things you've already mentioned, do you think now that you can reflect back now that there were some warning signs that maybe you ignored in the moment, but were actually present?
I didn't see it then, right? The whole like put in work. Like let's translate this to non-military terms.
Sure.
Put in work above everything else.
Mm-hmm.
That's a hint, right? That you got something wrong.
Yeah.
Like where you place yourself in your world becomes wrong. Because if you say your work, you're saying your work. So you're putting yourself above everything else. Right? Already. So that was a hint. Well, I stopped sleeping. So my sleep journey starts in 2012. Like I just stopped sleeping. Maybe that's an indicator of it. Meaning I would get 4 to 5 hours of combined sleep, like broken sleep on average a night.
Okay.
From 2012 to 2022. So for about 10 years until I took it serious. Right. So for about 10 years, I was just grinding, not thinking that it was important. So like I remember in summer of winter of 22 was the first time in like 10 years that I got a good night's rest. That was like 6 hours unbroken. Right. And I was part of a program. I was at Intrepid Spirit, which is a TBI program. So for like 5 weeks, I was point and place of duty was at this place, and we were just like uneffing everything. And just identifying things that I had wrong with my health. So that was one indicator, and that started in 2012. Maybe another indicator was my increasing dependence on alcohol. And dependence for what? I don't know dependence for what, but I truly believe we take on addictions to cover up the ugly stuff inside of us.
100% agree with you.
We just tend to blame the addiction and try to solve the addiction instead of solving what's underneath.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Just like people who are workaholics, right? You're going to work and work and work and work, and then you're going to see it's a problem. And you're saying, I have a problem with work. No, you're filling in the cracks of your life with work because you don't want to look inside that crack and see what's actually like screaming out for help.
Yeah.
So I think that's an indicator, the alcohol, the sleep.
Mm-hmm. These things just compounding.
Dude, they're compounding. And then the lack of, man, I don't want to say the lack of identity because I thought I knew who I was. But it wasn't a healthy identity.
Yeah.
And when I say healthy, I mean it wasn't a spiritually healthy identity. It wasn't an eternal one. It was a very temporary one with a lot of flaws. And when you have a temporary identity, how do you expect to identify the right target to aim at if you don't know what you are?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you can pick all the purposes in the world, right? And we see this with dudes, and maybe I'm skipping ahead, but we see this with dudes who we hear about, like our friends, direct friends and second degree, third degree away friends who kill themselves after being successful outside of the military. It's because even though you're going to throw a business suit on, you still have this temporary identity that has flaws, that is not eternal, and you don't even know what target you're shooting on because you don't know if you're an arrow, if you're a rock, if you're a water balloon, right? If you don't know who you are eternally, then how are you going to get at that target?
Yeah.
I know that's a lot in like the last 5 minutes, and I don't know but those are the indications. It's flawed identity, alcohol, lack of sleep.
So it is a lot, right? But we mentioned this earlier. There's no right or wrong answer. But in the spirit of Cookio Connect and what I 100% believe in my heart, in my heart, is that everybody's story is different. There's going to be somebody I know that watches this that may have those things and signs in their life, but they don't think them as indicators. They may think they're walking the right path. And those are just things that are a part of their path.
No.
They're not going to lead them down to being in their closet or being somewhere and faced with that lasting decision. So,
no.
Yes, there's a lot packed in there, but those are key things, right? So when I ask that question, there's an absolute purpose behind it. One, it's obviously a part of your story, but somebody's going to key off of that exactly. Actually, now that I think about it, I haven't slept in really well in the past 10 months. And I haven't been feeling well for the past 10 months. Maybe there's a connection out, and I really put those two things together. So,
Wow.
So your healing journey, right?
Yeah.
So what I take away from everything you just told me, that was your darkest moment. After the dark, you're going towards light, whatever that light is. You realize that was your darkest moment, and you're moving out of that. Did you seek help? Did you professionally? Was it something that you talked through with Carla? Who did you turn to at that time?
Yeah. So, um, when I left the West Coast,
Mhm.
so, um, for those who don't know, MARSOC used to also be on the West
Mhm.
Coast since they've completely moved the unit and consolidated on the East Coast. When I left Cali for Virginia, to be the monitor, um, as much as I hated it, it was it was a blessing and hardship that we needed,
Mhm.
right?
In your marriage
As a family.
as a family. Okay.
And I say in a blessing and a hardship because I think I think God put it in our lives to give us a piece of hardship that we could handle and that we needed. It was just the right amount that we could handle it, and we needed it during that time because it pulled us away um from what became home on the West Coast, and it pulled Carla away from her family, which was tough, but it pulled us out of our element and then just dropped us on this island of Quantico, Virginia,
Mhm.
where I didn't have a commute. I wasn't TAD often. I wasn't out of town often. I could literally walk to work and back. And for lunch, I did go home. So we had like a family environment for 3 years. Um, but I didn't turn to anyone for help.
Mhm.
I just knew at the time, I knew what I needed to be done. Like I just need to be a good dad.
Right.
I just need to be a good husband. There's a lot of self-help books on that. There's a lot of self-help books on trying to figure your stuff out. So I'll just figure it out.
In words.
I got this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got this. And there's stuff like I've learned and I can like Google stuff like tips. I got this. I'll figure it out. And we figured out some great things. We did. We figured out some great things. Kalia and I, so this is a trip. This is something memorable about that chapter is when we moved, I have a picture. I have a picture in my mind of that time
Mm-hmm.
in our townhome in Virginia on base because we chose to live on base.
Mm-hmm.
And have this picture of me. It's not even just a picture. It's a memory on repeat of me approaching Kalia, telling her good night. So Kalia, my daughter, who's now 17, then she was 8, telling her good night and her recoiling, and telling her I love you and her recoiling, right? And something in me was like, this is obviously not right, but something in me was like, okay, I'm going to keep working on this. So 8-year-old daughter, who I just don't, I thought, and here's the deal. We had hella fun
Right.
in Cali.
Right.
We have great memories. We did daddy-daughter dances. I don't want to minimize and discredit the great times we had. I took her for her first sushi like outing. Like we had a great, we had a good daddy-daughter relationship.
Yeah.
It's awesome. But it just wasn't as intentional and deliberate as it could have been.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so unintentional and deliberate or non-deliberate that she couldn't tell me goodnight and that she loved me back. And we worked on it. And then we worked on it. We made dinner time sacred as a family. So we created this routine and this pattern, right, of dinner time is sacred, dinner time is sacred. So we have real conversations. So we started having real conversations. We started reading books with her. We started doing things. I started coming alongside her. Carl and I tried to do stuff together and we thought we were figuring things out. I thought I was figuring things out, but we still clashed all the time. We still clashed all the time. But I was still like, I'll figure it out.
Right.
I got this.
Just haven't read that book yet.
Yep.
It's coming.
Yeah, I'll find the bright book. It'll click. Yeah, and then we went to Monterey, same story. So I spent about 6 years of trying to figure it out on my own. Until we got here to North Carolina. Kind of a long story. And I think we might get to it. But we got here in North Carolina, and not until we got here in North Carolina into a church community and into a relationship with God through Jesus did I really start depending and leaning on others. And that just changed everything.
Right. Complete perspective change. Yeah.
Like a complete perspective change.
Amongst hundreds of other things, but
Was
in a broader sense.
It was a complete turnaround.
Mm-hmm.
Like a 180. It was a complete, I'm walking in this direction and it's a complete turnaround in like a whole other direction, right? And that was powerful, bro. To this day.
This was
2021. So I go from 15 to 21 in this I got this phase.
Mm-hmm.
COVID happens, right? Towards the end of that phase. But what was cool about COVID, which is so stupid to say, but one of the things that COVID did, and I know a lot of people have a story like this, is that it shifted us in a direction that has been so valuable to us. What ended up happening was we're very big on Kalia's education. We thought she was in a good school. We saw under the hood during COVID, and we're like, that's shitty. You're telling me that she gets an hour of education and the rest of it's babysitting? Right? So we're like, okay, this is not what we want. We got super involved with their board, and we started trying to shape how they're going to approach the next year. We didn't like what was going on. So we found a classical education school who's been doing remote schooling, and it's synchronous. So you're in class and you have to have a camera on at certain times. So it's synchronous class. They've been doing it for a long time for families, but way before COVID. Like, we're going to do that. It's classical education. They teach logic. They teach rhetoric. They make it a point for the kids to read banned books, right? So, and this is when Cleo's in like 7th, 8th grade, fully 8th grade. Like, yeah, that's awesome. That's what we want for our daughter, and we're gonna like find money to pay for it.
It'll happen.
It's gonna happen. And then and this Jesus thing they talk about, cool, we can deal with that because the education's good.
Right.
So since prior to that time, we made our dinner table talk sacred, a habit, an opportunity for us to get together as family, and then we started developing like daddy-daughter dates and mother-daughter dates. So we had this pattern and this rhythm built into our family. Then like faith talk starts creeping into all those engagements.
Before she starts this.
When she starts that school.
Okay.
Right? Because they're talking about it in class.
Is natural.
Right? And yeah, it just starts happening. She talks about what's in class. And they're not just reading the Bible. They're reading the Quran. They're reading Mein Kampf. They're reading. They're filling out their perspective of life and
not forcing one specific.
No, and they're questioning things, right? And the class is called Great Conversations that they carry through through every year. She's a senior now, and they're still having great conversations. And 2021 comes, Cleo's 13, 14. She's spent like a year and some change, maybe a year and a half. I probably have it wrong, in Wilson Hill Academy, which is that classical school. You show up in North Carolina. There's churches all over the place. And she has her own testimony of her hard time in that transition. Because like any military family knows, the older your family gets, the harder it is.
Exponential.
It never gets easier. It gets harder, right? So that was like the hardest time she ever had with a move. And something tugs at her heart, and she's like, Dad, I think we should try a church. I'm like, I'm with you. I'll come shoulder to shoulder with you. I'm going to come alongside you. We're with you, or I'm with you.
Mm.
So she goes on Yelp, and she's like scrolling through Yelp.
5-star church.
No, no, I don't remember the stars, but she
Yeah.
came across this scathing review
Okay.
of some church. And the church was, I think the review was, how dare these people get together in a large group on the beach doing this baptism thing.
From like a COVID perspective?
This is 2021, bro.
Oh, jeez.
So yes, like, how dare these people do that? Right. And they do it every August.
Yeah.
And we pulled it up probably in September. So it was like a fresh one. And like, how dare these people? And then it was like a long review. I wish we screenshotted it because it's good, but I think the church removed it. And I'm like, that's the one we're going to. There's something bold about it that we liked, that we appreciated, because we were coming from an environment where everyone would wag their fingers at us if we were outside walking our dogs with our masks. So, we go to this church, but this church is in high school, like just down the street. So the church is in the high school, just down the street. There's signs all over the place. As we were driving up, there's people waving at us and with like Mickey Mouse hands. We're like, that's weird. And there's a sign, and we're driving up to a high school parking lot.
Yeah.
And there's a sign that says like, put your blinkers on if it's your first time. I'm like, nope. We drive by. Yeah. All right. So we drive by, we park in, and then we're like walking up to the gymnasium, and at least several times someone shakes our hand and gives us like a half hug and looks us in the face and greets themselves, and just like they just love on us with how they approach us.
Right.
The youth ministry staff member approaches Kalia, and she talks to Kalia and like connects with her. Like, that's weird too. Like, who walks up to strangers and just connects with people, right? And then we walk in, and we kind of go to the right towards the back, because it's kind of dark in there. Like, this is a church. This is weird. We've never been in a church that was like dark like this. And it's all set up chairs, like folding chairs all over the place. And it was kind of a nice setup, stage, good lighting, good production. And this countdown goes. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a countdown.
You gotta get a little into it, right?
Oh my, yeah. Like, oh my gosh, there's a countdown. And then people like, there's like a band. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a band here. And then it starts going, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is like a rock concert because it's good. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is really good music. And it's like, it fills you up. It's like feel good music. Right. And then like the words come up. So I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like a concert and karaoke at the same time. And then the pastor comes up to give a message, and it's personable. And it's relatable, right?
That's huge.
It's like a TED Talk. So I'm like, okay, this is a concert, karaoke, TED Talk. And people are just loving on us. And on our way out, the same thing. You know, we meet people, someone new, or like loved on. People say hello. We have noob faces on, right? I'm like, oh, how do they know? Like, oh, because our face. But we're also holding this box that they give to first timers that has a mug in it that says you belong here. And they're like, okay, this is our flag, of course. Yeah, like we're compromised. We have this box.
Can't hide.
And then, oh my gosh, probably one of the most important moments in my family's life. We meet an old lady in the parking lot. She's the last person that we talk to. She introduces herself. Her name's Janie. And she just loved on us. She greets herself. We tell her who we are. It's just Kalia and I.
Right. Day one,
just Kalia and I. And she's just schooling us and like sharing the gospel with us, like schooling us on what it means to be at a non-denominational Christian church. She asked if we had fun. Like, we did. We enjoyed ourselves. But then she especially asked, she's like, so where's your wife? And I'm like, she's not here. This is not really her thing. And she told us that she'd pray on her. Right? And I'm like, okay. And man, probably 2 years later, we learned. So 2 years later, from October 17th, 2021, that moment in the parking lot. And 22, yeah, a couple years later, we learned. A couple years later, my wife was going to church. I was going to church. Cleo was going to church. We were more and more integrated with the community. Coming into community with small groups that are now are like family. And we learned that from other people in Janie's small group. They're like, oh, you guys were the ones that we've been praying on for the last 2 years. And I'm like,
Why us?
thank you.
Yeah. Why? Like, why? What like made them gravitate to? But it was just something that just
by God's grace alone, right?
Wow.
And so much happened within that time period. So 2021, we get here. We start going to church. I have work stuff too, right? So
still active duty,
dude. And I was doing well, like in the position I was in. So as a senior enlisted, as the SIGINT chief and as the intel chief for MARSOC at the time, I was still going at it as it was that was me and that was my mission. And then an opportunity came along to fill like a joint billet. But this was at the same time that like I'm starting to get deeper into my faith and closer into relationship with God instead of just acknowledgement. I think most people, we just acknowledge, yeah, there's probably a God somewhere, and I believe in God and I pray, but I don't believe in being redeemed or saved by Jesus, because Jesus, who knows, right? So as I start going down this path and really going through the love logic of what this means and how real and true God's love is, like I start finding my identity and start splitting. Right. So that billet, at the time of that billet, I'm like, I just can't do it. I just wasn't feeling it for whatever reason. And I reached to a lot of people for counsel.
Sure.
But one of the things that tugged at my heart was when I asked Kalia, I'm like, hey, what if I move you again, like already? Like in 2 years from when we first got here. She said, it's okay. I'll deal with it. It would really suck. And I'm like, really? And I was like, man, I just can't do that.
Giving you the answer. Like, not verbally. Yeah. But as you hear that and your heart and your brain process that,
I was like, I just can't do it. And then when I realized that was the first time I said no to the Marine Corps, just the type of guy I am. I know other guys have lived different careers. I'm like, I'm done. I'm done. That just doesn't fit within my concept of service. I said no for the first time to what was asked of me, because I used to have like the mission at my highest value. I felt it shifting to God as my highest value. And I'm just like, then it's time for me to retire.
Right. It's an easy decision at that point.
It's an easy decision at that point. I'm like, okay, it's time for me to retire. I don't know how people do it. Some people do it well. I just couldn't do both. I could not serve two masters.
Right.
I just couldn't. Like, that's not how I live. That's not how I exist.
So there's some clarity in there with that, though. Right, Joe? But yeah, I truly believe it, because I think there's a lot of people that get to that phase where they're on the fence for a long time. am I doing the right thing? Am I staying in for the right reasons? Am I getting out for the wrong reasons? Whatever the case may be. But to have like, I wouldn't even say a moment, but a long period of clarity where you're like, hey, this is what needs to happen.
Yeah.
And just being at peace with that decision.
Yeah. And dude, I'll say, like, I never considered myself a lifer.
Mm-hmm.
At every single enlistment opportunity, like, I planned on getting out.
Right.
Even at 16 years.
Right.
Which is stupid.
It is stupid, but yeah.
Right? Yeah, especially on the 20-year pension, like,
Yeah.
period.
Yeah.
Like, but at 16 years, I was still wondering if I'm gonna
Do it one more time.
do it one more time, so.
So you had mentioned
Yeah.
something earlier about intrepid spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Was that something you sought out because you had heard about it before, or somebody presented you with that opportunity? How did that come into your life?
Yeah, that was another thing that just kind of happened too. Let's see, along this path, like, you started to go to church, and then here's the context. I think even before you receive salvation, meaning before you receive Jesus as your Lord and Savior, before you go into relationship with God, I think even if you're praying, like, I think God's calling you to himself. I think so. And then once receive him, things really start to transform, right? And things transform as if you are a work in progress, right? So it's a process. Part of that process for me, when I think back, was I was going into medical, for example, and we're talking about intrepid spirit, because, as we get older, we get injuries.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, you know what? I need to get, I forget what it was. It was a knee. I think it was my knee, my right knee. My knee's hurting. I need to get checked out. And do you remember, like, whenever you would go in, one of the intakes forms was like a mental health intake form?
Screaming.
Yeah.
He's definitely screaming. Yeah.
And just that day, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to be honest on this one.
This is how I feel.
I've been in the Marine Corps for like 21, 22 years by this point. I'm just going to be honest. I forget it. So I'm just like, boom. Like all in the red, pretty much. I'm like, yep. Nope. I don't sleep. All this stuff. Yes, I drink excessively. I don't feel good about myself. Like all this stuff.
Essentially fives across the board.
Yeah.
And
I'm like, cool. Submitted it. I'm in the middle of my session, my appointment with my primary for my knee. And some petty officer walks in. He kind of like creeps in. He's like, hey, Master Guns. Like, what's up? He goes, after your appointment, like, do you mind if you come to the other side, to the behavioral health, the BH side of the clinic? I'm like, is that a question? He goes, no.
Sounds pretty prescriptive.
You need to come over afterwards. I'm like, damn. Okay. So I went over, and then I did like a BH screening. And then they made me make another appointment after that. And the BH screening included, if I remember correctly, it included stuff about like TBI questions, really like how's your memory, like all this stuff. And I was honest about that because I don't fire as well as I used to, like as quick as I used to.
Sure.
So that's when my next appointment, they asked, like, hey, you should look into intrepid spirit. I'm like, okay.
Had you heard about intrepid spirit before that?
Kind of, but I never really,
knew what it consisted of.
Yeah, I'm just like, whatever, that's just a thing. I'm like, okay, I'll do it. So I ended up going to intrepid spirit fall of 22. Fall of 22. Yeah.
Wow. So thinking about the healing process, right, and the journey of where you're at now,
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's multiple things I think you can attribute to your healing process. I believe.
Oh.
You could tell me if I'm wrong. You know, if the intrepid spirit was one of them, you know, meeting Janie in the parking lot and having that conversation with her, saying the word conversation is probably underselling the importance
Yeah.
of what that was on your life. You know, now that you were out of the Marine Corps, you're out of the Marine Corps now. What are the things that you go towards to still help you on that healing journey? You talked about God, you talked about faith. What else? What are some of the other things that you gravitate towards?
Community is a big one, brother. And you know this, like personally. And we share that. So one, I'll say for a long time, I think we started, man, I think 2017 was the first time we started getting guys together once a year. It was a wolf pack, right? That was incredibly healing. And that was just kind of part of the path.
Yeah.
Because it was in that environment where I first let it out of my heart that I had that really dark bottom moment. That was the first time I ever talked about it, right? And to be honest, the only other time I ever talked about it was late 22 after Intrepid Spirit, as I started going into other men's groups. And someone asked me, what is your testimony? And then I shared it with those men, and I shared it with my wife and daughter for the first time, right? And testimony is a funny word because, like, at first I was like, what do you mean testimony? Like, I'm on trial? Like, what does that mean?
Right.
But no, they're like, no, how do you think God, like, worked in your life? And then I'm like, man, I just can't shake the fact that it was that moment when I was in my closet and I didn't know it then. Right? And that's the thing. And then I didn't know it then, but I can pull the string and be like, dude, he was there. Even though I didn't want to acknowledge him or be in relationship with him. Or even if I acknowledged him and I didn't want it, like, he was there. And then I pull it back. And that's what's awesome about the past. You can see when your heart changes, you could see where God was in your life.
Right.
When my parents split, I could see where God was in my life because he put my grandmother, my Lola, in my life. Right? When I was selfish and I joined the Marine Corps and I did all these things for whatever reason, like, okay, he was there. So that group I shared the testimony with is a Saturday morning men's group that's connected to my church, and that's been incredibly healing for me. Wolfpack has been incredibly healing for me. We have small community groups within our church that and Bible studies that my family is part of, has been very healing for me, dude. And this is so weird. Check this out. Like, I mentor a group of 12th graders. And we get together, like, part of our youth ministry. And I get to lead 12th graders, like, through their walk with Christ Wednesday nights. Dude, that's, to me, a guy from East San Ho who was a pothead and a graffiti writer, super selfish, very naive, and this feral human being who ends up going through the Marine Corps and just turning into something, right? Which, again, I'm going to go back to this, but that was God putting me in the refiner and making me into something that he can align me to God's kingdom. And now all of a sudden, like, I'm hanging out and, like, really just loving on this group of young men in a Christian youth group. Like, that's weird.
Yeah.
Dude, right?
paths aren't linear, right? They're
Bro.
twists and turns that
No.
get you to certain places.
And last year, I got to go to like a Christian youth camp,
Mhm.
right? And it's like we call it our squad weekend. So R is renovation, and squad just makes it sound cool.
Okay.
But it's like a weekend where you just worship and just dive into the Word, and just back in high school, I used to like make fun of those people.
Yep.
But now I get to experience that from whatever perspective I'm coming from.
Right.
And that's been super transformative too. Because when you talk about healing, and transformation, I think for men especially, right? You need accountability through wisdom carriers who are older than you. You do.
I
You need
agree
that,
with all of that.
right? Because it teaches you something. It's a different type of love, right? But then you also need this, right? With your peer group.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what some people are missing, and maybe they're missing the other stuff too, but being a mentor for younger dudes
Mm-hmm.
is so important for, I heard this word earlier, to be a comprehensive man.
Mm-hmm.
To be a comprehensive man with a whole round experience walking through this world as a man.
Mm-hmm.
I think you need that. And that is healing in itself.
Well,
right.
So we talked about a lot of different things. You said it, right? From San Ho, California. Sorry, East San Ho. I don't want to get the distinction wrong, but East San Ho, California. From being with Lola, parents, the fallout, things that led you up to joining the Marine Corps, getting the right MOS in 2671 that you later determined that this is where I needed to be, this is where I was supposed to be. And then you hit, I'll just call it the dark chapter, and we can talk about the length of it, but 2007, right? Starting in 2007, lasted a long time, not just a chapter, up until that moment in March where you found yourself in the closet. And then the path from coming out of that, and all the different phases that you guys has hit. 3 years at Quantico, the 6 years together where you're like trying to figure it out on your own. I don't even want to know how many books that you bought, right? Trying to be from the self-help days.
Yeah.
To truly at that point then hitting your healing journey, because everybody's journey is different and healing is different for everybody. It is a journey, it's a process, because I believe it just never ends.
Yeah.
You get on that journey and it's just consistent, it's constant. And once you get on it, you just keep going down that path. So
it never ends. Yeah.
From me to you, thank you for sharing your home, your kitchen, the meal, your story, everything that you shared with me. The fact that I get to be a part of that story of where our lives have intercepted and things that I've actually did not know until we've had this conversation, where I think there's a lot more alignment that I didn't know. And I'm looking forward to seeing you continue on the healing journey that you're on from this point forward, because I think there's a part that you've talked about that you're going to help me with my own healing journey. So thank you.
Thank you, brother.
I appreciate it, man.
Thank you. I mean, it goes both ways. I love it too, brother.